Welcome back to Taiwan Outlook. In our studio today is Dr. Joseph Wu, Taiwan's former ambassador to the United States. Dr. Wu, we talk about our government's efforts to try to balance our relation with the U.S. and our relation with China. But we try to maximize our benefits through maintaining both bilateral relations. But China tends to see that as a zero-sum competition. How difficult it is to balance the two?
Well, I think it's still very difficult for us to balance our relations with China and our diplomatic relations with the allies. The reason is because exactly what you say. The Chinese have always maintained the very hawkish attitude toward Taiwan's pursuit of international space. And as far as I can see, the Chinese government hasn't changed its position at all. To give you some of the incidences I saw only very recently. The final week of my stay in Washington, D.C., the Chinese foreign minister was in Washington, D.C., and some reporters asked him about the cross-strait relations and the possibility of Taiwan's international participation. His answer is very clear: one China principle. And just a couple of weeks before his visit to Washington, D.C., the Chinese ambassador to the United States also mentioned that under one China principle, anything is possible. And just last week, Mr. Wang Guangya, the Chinese ambassador to the UN, stated very clearly in Taiwan's thinking of having meaningful participation in the specialized agencies of the UN, not the UN itself. And the answer from Mr. Wang Guangya is that Taiwan is not qualified to participate in the UN or UN-affiliated affairs. And therefore, you can see that the Chinese is being very hawkish and very dogmatic in this regard. And therefore, for Taiwan to say that we want to have a diplomatic truce and we want to have a good relations with China without thinking that China may not want to stop its diplomatic maneuver in suffocating Taiwan's international participation is dangerous.
So, but are you arguing that so far we haven't seen China change its policy position, especially the so-called one China policy, yet?
No, I haven't seen any change at all. Some people mentioned, President Ma mentioned to some of the American guests that were invited to take part in the Taiwan-US conference hosted by the IIR. And President Ma used one incident to explain that China has already sent goodwills to Taiwan on Taiwan's international participation or the good results of the diplomatic truce, which was Mr. Hu Jintao's visit to South Korea. And President Ma says that Mr. Hu Jintao did not mention about one China principle. But if you look at the statement by South Korean leader, he's already mentioned the one China principle, and therefore there's no need for him to say it verbally. And if you look at their joint communique, one China principle is stated very clearly in that joint communique. So if you ask me whether China has changed its tone toward Taiwan, the answer is very clear. No, at all. And I think we're going to fall into a dangerous situation if we don't realize the reality that we are in right now is that China is still very hawkish in cornering Taiwan. One thing that I worry a lot is that the international participation effort by Taiwan government gradually is going to withdraw from our original stance that Taiwan has the right to participate in international organizations such as WHO and the UN. If you look at this year's effort, we don't talk about the UN anymore. We talk about the UN-affiliated organizations rather than the UN General Assembly. And that somehow seems to me is a goodwill gesture to China. But at the same time, it's telling our people that the Taiwan people are not entitled to participate in the UN itself. And for next year's World Health Assembly, it might be the same thing. We may not want to participate as a member or even a observer, and that might put us in a difficult situation. And if the Chinese side say that yes, now we can directly get in contact with the WHO itself for information flow, And some people here might say that it's a success and it's a result of the diplomatic truce. But let me tell you, that will be explained by China as the result of the 2005 MOU in between China and the WHO Secretariat. China will say that Taiwan can access the information only because of the Chinese approval, and that is going to hurt Taiwan's sovereignty further.
But the Ma administration has said that the diplomatic truce will only be applied to the so-called diplomatic allies, the number of diplomatic allies. In other words, we will not, take away your diplomatic allies. You don't take away our diplomatic allies. So why don't we freeze the number of diplomatic allies that we both maintain? Is that possible?
Well, I think it's going to be very hard, if possible at all. The reason is like this. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs on our side has already ordered our diplomats everywhere not to engage in the pursuit of new relations. So we don't have any leverage in our hand anymore. But at the same time, since we already been seen by many people in the world, especially our diplomatic allies, that the current government is pursuing a conciliatory policy with China, and some people even consider the current government as leaning toward China, and therefore it's not a problem for them to talk to China as well. And therefore you can see that the Chinese side has all kinds of leverage in their hand, and there's one incident that is going to sour the relations between Taiwan and China. China can do a lot of damage to Taiwan's diplomatic relations with those allies. But I think for Taiwan people or for our diplomats, the term diplomatic truce itself is confusing and is
also demoralizing.
For the people in Taiwan. Diplomacy, it's always an uphill battle, and it's always been very difficult. And to our diplomats everywhere, even though it's not a real war, but we have been handling in a way as if we are handling a war. We talk about difficult missions, and we want to overcome the difficulties in order to fulfill the mission. And the way to think about it is like to think about the war, and therefore to tell our diplomats that there's going to be a diplomatic truce, as if we are telling our diplomats to lay down your weapons and do not have to do anything anymore. And if you ask me, the one who's been working in Washington, D.C. for 15.5 months, everything I do in Washington, D.C., China gets upset. When I talk to the congressmen may get phone calls and harassment from the Chinese embassy. I visit different states, those governors or senior officials in those states get harassed or get concerned by the Chinese officials as well. Even in some university campuses, the Chinese officials do the same. And I still remember I invited the National Security Council official to take part in the Dragon Boat Festival. The Chinese government launched a very serious protest to the National Security Council. And therefore, if we try not to do anything to upset China, according to the spirit of diplomatic truce, that means that we don't have to do anything anymore. And in fact, the very existence of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Taiwan is making China upset, because that means Taiwan is sovereign. Taiwan has the right to pursue diplomatic relations.
Yes, but some people argue that, we spend too much money or resources on maintaining the diplomatic ties. And in this world, it doesn't matter too much, even if we lose all the 23 diplomatic allies. What's your view on that?
Well, my take on that is that we do need diplomatic allies for a very simple reason. We want to participate in international activities, and we want to be a member of major international organizations. We want to be a member of the UN, and we want to be a member of the World Health Organization. And some of our diplomatic allies, they may be very small, but they are represented in the international organizations, and they can speak on our behalf. And therefore, if we continue to want to become member of the international organizations, we need these diplomatic allies to have our voice heard, and we need them to continue to support Taiwan, and we cannot do without them. Zero diplomatic allies means zero possibilities for Taiwan's voice to be heard in major international organizations such as UN and the World Health Organization. And if you look at Taiwan people's desire, when I was in the Men Affairs Council, we ran public opinion surveys all the time, and the people in Taiwan have indicated in a very strong sense that we want to be part of these international organizations. And if we continue to be wanting to become part of these international organizations, I think that is something that we absolutely have to have. And the second perspective of having the diplomatic allies is that Taiwan used to be a poor country. And we received a lot of foreign aid when Taiwan was much less developed. And now Taiwan is much better developed than most of the countries in the world. And now it's time for Taiwan to pay its responsibilities as one who can help others. And if you look at the standard of the OECD countries in their foreign aid, it's 0.7% of their GDP. And if you look at Taiwan right now, our total foreign aid, if you lump everything together, it's only about 0.13 to 0.14%. And therefore, it's still a tremendous amount of room for us to improve ourselves in helping other people that is still in need of the help from outside outside their countries.
When we come back, I will play the devil's advocate, because some people argue that the solution to Taiwan's international space lies in China's hands. In other words, to negotiate with China is more important than maintaining those diplomatic allies. And also, you are our ambassador to the United States for almost 15 months. So when we come back, we'll talk about your personal experiences of working in the D.C. area. So stay with us. We'll be back after these few moments.